Patience is the name of the game in the NBA world, with so many talented young players struggling out of the gate as a rookie. It's very easy for fans to get discouraged by these early struggles and write them off, and trust me, I see a lot of people do exactly that every year. But at the same time, after a few seasons, we need to be realistic about what a player's future is if they haven't shown the signs of potential growth to keep fans excited about them long term. Sometimes the truth sets us free, and in today's video, we're going into the unfortunate truth about 4 young NBA players in particular that were all former lottery picks that entered the league with a lot of hype, but it is now officially time for us to give up on them. These are players that may still be able to salvage long NBA careers, but the chance of them ever reaching the upside people once thought they had is now slim to none. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player we'll be discussing today that it is officially time to give up on is Patrick Williams of the Chicago Bulls. I remember when Kawhi Leonard was fresh off of his otherworldly run to the title with the Toronto Raptors, where he took home another Finals MVP to add to his trophy case, cementing himself as one of the greatest developmental stories the league has had in recent memory. And after that, the entire league seemed to start looking for the next Kawhi Leonard to develop themselves. Patrick Williams came along at the perfect time because as a prospect, he resembled Kawhi in a few ways that definitely impacted his rise up draft boards as a strong-bodied 6'7" wing player with the raw yet intriguing shot creation skills, a knack for competing on the defensive side of the ball, and a calm, poised demeanor. Williams came out of the gate as a rookie locking up the starting power forward spot on the team because he was an impactful defender from day one, and he was competent enough as a secondary scoring threat to keep defenses honest and score about 9 points per game when the opportunities presented themselves. He was never a ball-dominant player, he's not really good enough at creating separation to be a high-volume focus of a team's offensive game plan, but he was consistently efficient in low-volume usage, shooting about 39% from 3 for his career and 45% from the field, but he was only taking about 7 or 8 shots total per game. He also just flat out never really improved through the first 4 seasons of his career, producing the literal same stat lines season after season, either averaging between 9 or 10 points every time, grabbing about 4 rebounds per game every time too. What lands him on today's list is that last season in his 5th year in the league, he regressed big time, losing his starting spot in the lineup, shooting the ball terribly, making just 39% of his shots and 35% of his threes, and I'm sorry, but if he can't make any kind of significant improvements through 5 seasons and ultimately starts trending in the wrong direction, then the days of him being a promising developmental project with the tools reminiscent of Kawhi Leonard need to be looked at as unrealistic and a pipe dream now. Williams does not have the wiggle to become a go-to scorer, he doesn't provide much as a playmaker, and he's never taken enough shots to really be considered a quote-unquote good shooter, even if the averages have looked nice in the past, so it's time to admit that his ceiling is a lot lower than many thought it was 5 years ago when he was drafted 4th overall in 2020. The next young player it's officially time to give up on is Scoot Henderson of the Portland Trail Blazers. Now again, I want to make it very clear that the players we're talking about today can absolutely still be positive contributors down the line, but the part we need to give up on is the idea of them ever reaching the star caliber ceilings many once thought that they had. Scoot Henderson came to the NBA after playing 2 seasons with the G League Ignite program, where he became the youngest player to ever play a G League G-League game, and overall played really well from a young age against professional competition. What stood out about him at such a young age was that he seemed to have an NBA-ready body that could handle the physicality of the competition. He had some absolutely explosive plays attacking the basket that led everyone to believe he was a top percentile type of athlete, and his quickness on the ball made him feel like a can't-miss prospect. His hype train got so big that in a draft class with Victor Wembanyama, he was staying neck and neck with Wembanyama at the top for a lot of the early pre-draft process, and in a game where the G-League Ignite played a scrimmage against Wembanyama's club team, Scoot actually played just as well as Wemby in those scrimmages. Scoot was being compared to great point guards like Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, and John Wall because of his supposed combination of speed and explosiveness on the ball, along with a smooth pull-up jumper, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very high on Scoot Henderson at the time of the 2023 NBA draft myself. But unfortunately, in the NBA, the reality of his physical tools have proven to be much less than expected, and that alone lowers his ceiling quite a bit. Scoot just is not nearly as fast on the ball or as explosive of an athlete as the players that I mentioned earlier, and for a player whose success stemmed from his ability to beat guys off the dribble and make plays around the rim, it has disappointed the masses. Scoot is still a fine player, all things considered, averaging about 13 points and 5 assists per game last year, shooting the ball 42% from the field and 35% from 3 last season, but he's not nearly a good enough shooter of the ball to hit the top tier of stardom of the position, and without the jump out of the gym athleticism, his peak may just be a player that can serve as a low-end starting point guard that doesn't have the it factor to ever be an all-star, and anyone is still expecting him to be that star in the making that he once was is probably holding on to false hope. The next young player it's time to give up on now is Isaac Okoro of the Chicago Bulls. It's kind of funny that Okoro is now teammates with Patrick Williams in Chicago after those two were taken back-to-back in the 2020 NBA draft, being selected 4th and 5th overall respectively. Okoro has spent the first 5 seasons of his career in Cleveland, where he has for the most part been the team's starting small forward, but at the same time the small forward position was the team's biggest weakness for years, in large part to Okoro's disappointing development. Also similar to Patrick Williams, Okoro's calling card as a prospect was being able to put his advanced physical tools to use on the defensive side of the ball, being lauded as a versatile lockdown defender that can shut down multiple different positions. He definitely also benefited from the timing of the search for the next Kawhi Leonard craze, because he wasn't much of a creator at all on offense, and he also wasn't comfortable as a shooter in any kind of substantial volume at the time. In college, he only took about 2 threes per game, and in the NBA, he has maxed out at an average of 3 three-point attempts per game, always being the 5th option on offense whenever he's on the court. Don't get me wrong, he has definitely been a great defensive talent through 5 years in the NBA that has helped Cleveland rank amongst the best teams on that end of the floor year after year, but his offensive game has not developed even a little bit in that span, and his role is shrinking. He peaked as a rookie playing the most minutes per game of his career that year, and then he just came off of a season where he played the fewest minutes per game of his career, and when Cleveland traded Okoro to Chicago in exchange for Lonzo Ball earlier this summer, it signified that Cleveland had officially given up on the player that they used a top 5 pick in the draft to select. In Chicago, he's getting a fresh start in a new environment, but his spot in the rotation is the furthest thing from a guarantee. Kevin Huerter will likely be the team's starter at the position. Modest Buzelis is carrying a lot of momentum from his rookie season, poised to break out in year 2 as well, and even if Okoro locks down a bench role on the team, that's more than enough evidence to admit that he's not going to have the career that a top 5 pick is supposed to have when it's all said and done. And finally, the last young player we'll be discussing today that it is officially time to give up on is Usman Dieng of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Dieng was a lottery pick in the 2022 NBA draft, being taken 11th overall that year, and I don't blame you if you completely forgot about that. Lottery picks, fair or not, are expected to be positive contributors in a team's rotation at absolute minimum, and realistically, you hope to find someone good enough to be in a team's starting lineup after a few years in the lottery. Dieng, meanwhile, hasn't even been able to consistently carve out a role in the team's rotation at all, has spent most of his time in the G League, and has yet to even play in half of the Thunder's games in a season, with the most appearances he's made in a season came as a rookie, where he played in 39 games that year. As a rule of thumb, you typically like to see a player take any kind of leap by year 3, but Usman Dieng is losing ground in the race for minutes on a championship roster, and with the team set to be contending for championships for years, the ship has probably sailed on his development being any kind of a priority on this team. Unfortunately, he's someone whose disappointment isn't entirely his own fault, because he came in as a known project that would need patience to develop, and the Thunder just have not been able to give him much grace given their lofty goals as a unit. He's done well in the G League, improving as a creator on the ball and showing off an improved, smooth handle as a slasher, but if he wants to make it as any kind of contributor at the NBA level, he's probably going to have to do it on another team. For that reason, I'm not saying it's time to give up on him making it in the NBA in general, because if given the opportunity, he could blossom on a team with less pressure on them in the immediate future, but with 3 years of his career already having passed, with nothing to show for it, the likelihood of his maximum potential ever being reached also seems like a pipe dream in the current timeline. He's a career 4-point per game scorer who has never shot above 32% from 3 and doesn't have enough tape to sway teams to line up to take a swing on him. So with him currently trapped at the end of the Thunder's bench, he's a name that will likely continue to be forgotten about. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these young players and their futures. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.